welcome to the Cultivating Calmness Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Emily Hanlon, here today, and we're going to talk about IFS, or internal family systems, and self-care, expressive arts therapy, kind of all of that stuff, because that is her specialty. And Emily Hanlon is a local therapist here in Columbus, Ohio, and owner of Spiral Path Counseling. She is an EMDR certified EMDR therapist, a level 2 IFS therapist, and she is working on her expressive arts therapy certification. So we're excited to have her here today. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You know, you worked with me a little bit several months ago, actually probably almost a year ago now, presenting at the Mental Health Professionals Luncheon that I host, and talked about IFS and expressive arts therapy there. And so I just wanted to kind of bring that in today and hear your expertise, share it with other therapists and other, people in the world who might be interested.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah, I love talking about these things. So, yeah.
Well, if we back it up to the beginning, what got you started in the world of counseling and therapy to begin with?
Yeah, so before I went to grad school for social work, I worked in the housing homelessness world for a while, as a case manager, and then also as a mediator in eviction court. And that led me to decide I wanted to get my master's so that I could, and I imagined myself doing more macro level social work and working in the housing world. But in graduate school, I had a field placement doing community-based intensive family therapy, and I just kind of fell in love with doing therapy with the mental health world.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I was trained in more traditional family therapy approaches, IFAST was the model I was trained in. And now there's a lot of interesting intersections with internal family systems, which is kind of about applying some of those things internally. But yeah, I did community mental health for a few years. I worked in drug and alcohol treatment as a clinician. And I feel like a lot of my early career was a lot of growth, but also a lot of stress and anxiety, just kind of pressure on myself, to quote unquote fix my clients, and overburdened sense of responsibility, feeling like I have to keep trying harder, training more and more. And eventually, I found my way to more somatic therapy approaches like EMDR, and then eventually internal family systems and more expressive arts approaches, which I think really allowed me to expand my capacity to do this work. I wasn't sure for a while if I was going to be able to stay in the field because I was just so overwhelmed all the time.
Yeah.
But it was also a very empowering path for me too, because I found these approaches just made more sense on a just body level for me than some of the more skills-based therapies I was doing.
Yeah. I your point about more trainings. I feel like that pressure is always there. And in doing the luncheons, there's all kinds of things that I'm learning, ooh, that would be nice. Ooh, that would be, yeah. We would be in training forever and never actually get to practice anything. So you basically, in just kind of doing that work, found that you liked more of the somatic type practices, like you said, EMDR and IFS. And so you pursued those, and you're, working your way up that ladder, I guess. So yeah, and you found a way to integrate them, as well as bringing in that expressive art piece, which and I guess we could say is maybe somatic, but it's a little different, hands-on approach to therapy.
Yeah. I think I started with EMDR, and I think folks who do EMDR for a while, it's not long before they start hearing about parts work and yeah. And that for the parts of me that were very striving, perfectionistic, oh my God, and I have to learn this whole new thing. It was a little overwhelming. However, I think IFS, EMDR integrate in a really nice way. And I find that present day, I'm usually always using those approaches on a spectrum with folks. Some people take really well to a more straightforward, pure, so to speak, EMDR approach. Others IFS, but I feel like most of us are on a spectrum.
Yeah. So can you tell us what is IFS?
Yeah. So IFS stands for Internal Family Systems. It's a psychotherapy developed by Richard Schwartz. And the idea behind IFS is that, our mind is multiple and we all have different parts of us, or we can think about them. Some people don't like the word parts. You can also say like aspects or states that we get in.
Okay.
And these parts of us hold experience and memory, and also, if we think about it from a brain science perspective, like predictive patterns and neural pathways, So, for example, I may have a part of me that's very like motivated, and I'm like, I'm going to start this new routine tomorrow. It's going to be amazing. I'm going to like eat clean, and I have my new calendar with my pens, my color-coded pens, and everything is going to be amazing. And when I'm in that part of me, I feel this like proactive, motivated energy. And then I might have another part of me that like when I'm in the evening, fatigued, is like, oh, whatever, like you don't need to be doing all this anyway, like just relax. And maybe I like numb out a bit through food. And both of these parts of me are trying to help me in different ways, but they have different perspectives, thoughts on what is helpful for me. So most of us can kind of relate to having that like internal dialogue inside our head, or feeling kind of frustrated or confused about why we seem to quote unquote self-sabotage. Like when I hear self-sabotage, to me, I just think in parts now. It's not that you're sabotaging yourself. It's that there's some part of you or parts of you that are kind of at odds inside. And so for folks who've been through a lot of, significant trauma, early childhood trauma, parts can take on more and more extreme roles to protect us. And so if we think about, things like self-harm or suicidal ideation or eating disordered behavior, IFS have used that through the lines of these are protective parts that have taken on extreme roles to help us. And so the impact those parts of us have externally might not necessarily be a good thing, but it's a very non-pathologizing approach where it's like what we call a pro-symptom approach, which, means there's a reason behind the symptom. There's a positive intent behind the system. And I find that just, a lot more of a non-pathologizing and empowering way for people to experience themselves and maybe take a little of the shame away from the sense of I need to manage and fix and get rid of these like pieces of me that are unacceptable.
Yeah, so I think that was something that I took away from like when you presented on it, and like really made sense. I describe it when I'm with clients as I use parts, but that's good that you're right. Some people like hear that and they think like multiple personality disorder, and you're like, maybe that's like an extreme form, maybe. But I also say it's kind of like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like I say you have like the part of you who goes to work, and you have the part of you who's at home with your family, and the part of you who goes out with your friends, and it's all you, but just different parts of you come forward at different times based on the situation, your surroundings, what's more or less appropriate, etc. Does that kind of like similar, but maybe not the same as?
Yeah, absolutely. I think different parts of us come out in different contexts. Like there's parts of us that are kind of the more proactive parts that like keep our day-to-day life going, the parts of us that show up at work, that pay our bills, at least most of the time, like, do the kind of like, and IFS, we sometimes think of those parts too as they're trying to maintain our connection with others and our image and, those kind of like pro-social, urges that we have, and those parts can also be parts that are like our inner critic or, you're not doing enough, you need to do more, like, so, and there's like a intention there to motivate us to like keep connecting and striving.
But, and to your point, it's always more of that, like view of like positive intent, right? Like with the parts. And so when like you talked about self-sabotage. When we think we're self-sabotaging or something is not going so well to the external world, would you say that it's like those parts of us are actually trying to protect us, but it's coming out as not so good, like from others' perspective or even our own, like, why am I doing this? Like, this is not a good thing. It's their way of trying to protect us from something. Or
Yeah,
maybe talk a little bit about that.
sure. So, like I said, there's parts of us that maybe are parts that are like really pushing us to quote unquote be better or, change like our workout habits or eating, or like, achieve at work, those kind of striving parts of us. There can also be parts of us that they're more kind of reactive. And when we feel overwhelmed by emotion or feel unsteady, those parts kind of come in to put out the flames of, or, to put out that emotion.
Yeah.
And so that can look like numbing out by scrolling or, like emotional eating or just like disconnecting, substance use, like, and there can be kind of a cycle of, you do that, then you feel shame and guilt, and then you're like, now I got to do better. And there's like that cyclical nature of things. And I think framing it as self-sabotage just is so frustrating for folks because you feel the sense of like, I know what to do. Like, I know what to, the simple thing, why can't I do it? But there's usually a reason why that like, other part of us is coming out to kind of like, numb us out or keep us safe. And it could be just something, that's not as intuitive as it initially seems. For example, if you, when you were younger, kind of directly, indirectly got the message like that, achieving things is what gives you like connection and kind of like attention and support from other people, just simply resting might feel kind of confronting. It might feel like not safe on like a somatic body level, to be just resting without, especially without this intent of like, well, I'm going to rest so that I can then do the, but just simply to rest can be scary.
Yeah, because you have that pull to like, I have to be doing. And so then your body's like, stop that. And you like have this like as push-pull, like I can't rest, but it's not necessarily a conscious thought that I can't rest because I won't be good enough if I don't, do this. Okay. So like our parts can be split into different like pieces. I think, some of the things you had described were like, we have our managers, our firefighters, like exiles. And then I think there's others, but those are some like common types. So like our parts can be broken down into different types. And when you're in treatment with someone like you, who's IFS trained or even informed, like what is it that you're doing with parts? If you can tell us a little bit about that to identify these parts and like then start to work with them.
Yeah. So I think initial phases of, IFS look like me either like with the client mapping the parts I'm hearing and reflecting back, and maybe even visually mapping a little bit to kind of help get a sense of, oh, this is like kind of creating that distance to be able to observe like these internal dynamics. And then hopefully that then creates a, invitation to be like, is there a part that you feel called to like get to know first? And that can then like transition into doing more of like the traditional like IFS getting to know a part. But of course, like all of that's dependent too on like, where is the client at? Are they like, this lady's crazy talking about parts? Like, it's some people come and they really do, they already have a little bit of a basis and they, are interested in doing that type of work. For others, that's kind of, I think, doing a little psychoed or kind of like easing them into the idea, making sure you're not crazy, like you don't have, crazy, nothing wrong with having dissociative identity disorder, but like it doesn't mean you have dissociative identity disorder just because you have parts. Right. But I find more often than not, it creates like a little bit of an opening and like self-compassion when people can see, oh, this piece of me that other parts of me hate so much actually is working for me, for my benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So when it comes to like, you've learned to like incorporate EMDR with IFS.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work?
So I just like I said with it being on a spectrum, I would say I tend to, for EMDR, when someone comes to me and they have event-based trauma that's very clear, the more classic PTSD symptom, like memories that are intrusive, activating, especially if it's like a recent event, a recent trauma, like EMDR is more my go-to to kind of, because we don't want them to be in a constant hyper-aroused state. Like we want to help them resolve those intrusions. EMDR is usually my go-to there because I think it can get some relief of some of that activation a little more quickly. But I think just getting to know your client, like sometimes people come in and they might have an event-based trauma, and they also have a lot of like relational trauma and kind of complex stuff on top of all that. And when that's the case, like integrating parts work too, like there's the part of them that's like, I got to come to therapy. I know that I need to like work with XYZ. It's like getting in the way. That's the part of you that's bringing you to therapy, right? There might be parts of you that don't feel comfortable showing emotion in front of someone else, that don't want to go there, or that might come in, dissociative parts that come in and they blank you out and make you go numb. And so part of like doing EMDR with parts work in mind is, not viewing those as defense mechanisms or blocking things, but more a natural part of the process. And you have to build safety with those parts and buy-in from those parts of the client before you continue or like,
I see. Is that where you might see some like, so if you weren't doing parts work, let's say like me, like I'm not trained in IFS and I have somebody who's maybe we're trying to do EMDR, but like we're hitting maybe that block. It's a possibility that part of that block could be a part of them that's resistant in some way or is afraid or, to like open up to that possibility. Yeah. So that would, in theory, that would be something where you could address like what this part is, who is this part, like can we get to know this part versus EMDR would say like what's the block? Let's do EMDR for the block. And let's see if we can get through that.
Yeah.
Am I getting kind of like, am I on the right track?
Yeah. I think it's all like intersecting. Yeah. Like that EMDR approach, like the blocking beliefs questionnaire, or, sometimes I think in EMDR, there is a part that comes up that might be, for lack of a better word, blocking. And you can work with that part in the context of EMDR processing. But I think it's when that part's like, no, I'm not going to step aside. Like, I'm not going to, and so that's when I think shifting to like parts work can be helpful to kind of explore, and not the non-pathologizing aspect being, okay, whatever's showing up here, like it's important and we need to give it space and attention, whatever this like part is that is numbing you out or flooding you or distracting you, and I think there's ways to even work with that with like slow bilateral movement of like, we're just going to get to know this part and like see if we can build some trust or like separation from whatever this part or ego state that seems to come in. So I don't know if that makes sense when I say it that way, but I think what I like about part, and to be clear too, like IFS isn't the only model that like works with parts. There's all sorts of ways of learning this, but it always makes me like a little sad when I hear someone say like, oh, EMDR just didn't work for me. And what, like, EMDR doesn't have to be like the be all, and there's so many approaches. Like I know EMDR has good PR,
But we all think that EMDR can solve anything, you know?
Mm. However, it's like, just because you had a certain experience, it may have just been that you needed some parts work or you needed some different resourcing, or it just wasn't the right approach for you. Like, that's always totally fine as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so like IFS, EMDR like tend to take more of that like root cause approach, right? And
Mm-hmm.
from like a health perspective, I also look at things that way. And so I really like
Yeah.
that, right? Because we're not just looking at that surface, like, why are you here? Right. But it's like, okay, well, what ultimately brought you here? Or even, like you said, more recent traumas, like I got in a really bad car accident, and yes, clearly like the car accident is maybe what's currently causing your PTSD, but there's also that past stuff that is, going along with this current thing that may be directing you or preventing you from healing or moving on or whatever. So it's important to look at those things as well. So I really like that about these things.
Yeah. There's a IFS therapist. I can't remember her name. It'll come to me later.
Mm-hmm.
But she uses EMDR and IFS, and she described it as like the way she would like describe the difference of the feel between EMDR and IFS to a client is like, it's like there's a basement and there's all these boxes in it. And we're going to go down and explore what's in these boxes, or if we could think of them like neural pathways and memory networks. And EMDR is kind of like, we're going down there, we're just ripping open about, we're like opening everything up, we're just seeing what comes up.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas IFS is a little more, all right, which box do you want to go to first? Okay, we're going to look at this one. Now we're going to go to this one. The pace of it is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think for clients who have a lot of complex trauma or like relational difficulty because of their experiences, that slower approach can work a little better for them.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. I like that visual. I'm a visual person, so that kind of helps with that.
Yeah.
So as like somebody is using, like if you're using IFS with somebody, IFS EMDR, and like we're talking about how they can manage, right? So like the whole visual you just gave us, right? EMDR is maybe more flooding at times because it's like we're going to open it all up and we're going to see what comes out. IFS is more individually based, but I'm guessing can still cause some flooding depending on what box is opened.
Mm-hmm.
Like how do we help our clients to hold on to that? Like how do we like to care for that and to like manage that in between and during sessions? So like that self-care, like how are we helping them to get through that? Or even ourselves, because we can use some of these skills ourselves to help. What are some of like those strategies that you use with your clients or yourself?
Yeah.
And it's a broad question. Sure, there's lots of ways this can go.
Well, I would say in the context of trauma therapy with a client, a big part of, I think if in any session, if you're doing some type of somatic processing work, and then in between sessions or the next session, the client's like, that I was totally overwhelmed all week, like just flooded. It was awful. Or maybe they're having suicidal ideation. Like, to me, that's an indication there was a backlash from some part of them that was bypassed too quickly, like went a little too fast.
I see.
And so when that happens, I think it's very important to work with like, okay, what was that backlash? What concerns do their parts have about doing this work? And I also think there can be some ways of trying to prevent that by making things very permission-based. And ways I do that with EMDR or IFS is, asking, is there any part of you that feels concerned about us going here or looking at this memory?
Okay.
And really allowing them to sit with that for a moment and see what comes up. sometimes nothing comes up. But if there is a concern, it's important to like work with that and acknowledge it, because if you don't, I think that's why, maybe it was even a great EMDR session. We kind of got, through a really tough memory, but then this other part comes in. It's like, it's like we're upsetting the apple cart. And like, I think that's why there can be that backlash in between sessions. So, so maybe that answers your question a little bit. That came to my mind when I think about more my clients and like trauma work.
Yeah.
And then I think more broadly, like working with parts, like for yourself and others, like, I think learning how to get to know your parts can kind of help give you a little more direction as to what is it that I'm actually needing right now, or what in me needs like attention versus the more kind of disembodied self-care of like, I gotta book a massage, I know I need to do this and that, and but it's more trying to tune into like, what is it that I'm actually needing.
Yeah, so that's what that embodied like self-care is, more of like, you kind of described it there. I was like, I know I should do this, versus what is my body telling me? What is like the me, telling me that I need right now, even if like that logical part of me is like, no, don't do that. Can you talk a little bit about that and like how we explore that and how we can pay attention to that self and knowing what we need versus what we maybe don't need?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, kind of like I was saying before, I always think it's interesting whenever, especially when we're in this space of like, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to start like taking care of myself in whatever way, but we are continuously just not doing it for whatever reason, not making the time, or, and we're in that cycle. I think learning how to tune into, okay, what is the part of me that is pumping the brakes, and kind of, and the way you can do that, I think there's lots of different ways. It could be through journaling, meditation, and that's where expressive arts can be really helpful, because it can be a way of externalizing and just noticing what comes up in you. But for example, if it's like, oh, I just use like the fitness example, just because like everybody seems to, myself included, like I'm gonna start like lifting weights and just like never doing it. It could be a concern about what impact will me prioritizing myself and my time have on the people around me. Maybe there's a sense of like it doesn't feel comfortable to do that, or it could be about just being seen, or I had a client who had this, he received all these messages about like his life will start when he loses this weight that he has. And I just thought, when we got to know that part, it's like, oh, that's really confronting to feel like, oh, well, your life isn't quote unquote started. And once it has started, then you'll have to like do all these things and do things differently and put yourself out there. So there can be a lot of interesting stuff underneath the surface, I think.
That's an interesting, like even just that example, right? Like, the messages we receive versus what maybe was actually heard. And that happens a lot, I think, in trauma, and just with the EMDR, we focus a lot on those core beliefs, and I say like we don't know exactly where they came from and why, and they don't have to be big traumas, but it's just like messages that you get from people that maybe are well-meaning and well-intentioned, but our brain hears them and we like in it and twist it, and for again whatever reason, whether it's parts or beliefs that we have attached to ourselves, and do that. And how do we like untangle that and untwist that? That's what you were doing.
Yeah. And I think part of that is kind of learning to notice and be in a relationship with those parts of you that kind of like are speaking those things in your mind. And another piece is you have to like in a comfortable way, have experiences that allow you to like have a different experience of yourself. Like it's not like you'll just internally shift and then, you'll do the thing. Sometimes it's like we have to take small steps towards doing the thing and building those new experiences. For example, like setting a boundary with your partner or something like that. It's going to feel extremely confronting until you can practice both doing it and then like attuning to the parts of you that felt like, whoa, 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 that was, too much or a lot.
So when it comes to like that attuning piece, are there ways that somebody can do that? Are there like specific strategy you use to like instruct your clients or like to do that piece? Because I'm sure that's not always easy.
Yeah. So kind of depends on the client, the situation, but what comes to my mind is particularly if we're, one, just learning to have a little bit of an awareness of the parts that commonly come online in certain like relationships or work situations, whatever it is. But then also sometimes learning to just speak for our parts in a way that it can feel very natural, not like, if I were speaking to you and was like, I'm noticing a part of me that just really wants to do a good job and I'm like over explaining, just like naming what's coming up in you when you're in communication with other people, as opposed to in IFS what we call being blended with that part and kind of speaking through that part and kind of seeing the world through the eyes of that part. So I don't know if that's like too vague when I say it, but like it's kind of a way of being able to build some awareness of like, okay, I feel this discomfort right here, the sense of like I'm doing something wrong by setting this boundary, but learning how to notice and have it be beside you while you're doing something new.
Yeah, so one of the strategies is to like label it, name it, kind of like give it light almost, right? Whereas we tend to like hide those things and we don't want that to be known. And so part of that work is like outside of, well, we're in therapy, but outside of therapy is like, I'm feeling very this, and this part of me is doing this, this, and this, and the other part of me is doing this, this, and this. And like if it's explaining it to yourself, or even it sounds like explaining it to other people, like maybe your partner, like we're having an argument and it's like, okay, this is what's going on with me and I'm shining light on it and I'm bringing it forward. That's like, that helps, that kind of integration that you're talking about with self. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think so. And again, this is like a practice and it's not about doing it perfectly or feeling like I always have to, know every single part of me. That's what, it's just, I think most people can relate to like if there's a sticky situation in their life, they're like, I keep getting stuck in this, mode or this like thing. And I maybe know it's not helpful, but it's hard to like do something different. I think that's where learning to speak for those parts or just name them can help to create more flexibility inside.
So, how do you bring in that expressive arts piece into all of this?
Yeah. So,
and what is expressive arts? If we like give a definition to it, how would you define it?
Sure. So expressive arts can encompass all sorts of different like modes of expression. It could be like visual art, movement, sound. It could even be like social media, like any type of medium. And to me, expressive arts is about it. It's not about creating like a finished product or outcome, but more engaging in something and noticing your experience as you are engaging with it, like your thoughts, feelings, sensations, as you like look at if you made something that's physical, like what do you notice in your state, like before and after doing that. And so with parts work, it can be helpful to, especially if it's hard to kind of like gain some awareness of like what's happening inside, do something like we're kind of do something expressive through this part of you, whether that's like drawing or this part's going to create a playlist or we're going to like kind of externalize this part through some type of medium that makes sense and can help you to then be with it and notice how you're feeling towards that part. As opposed to just doing like the internal focusing, which sometimes that can be a little overwhelming for folks. I think a lot of people are familiar with like journaling as a way to, you know, externalize or like see like what's happening in my mind. Let me put it on paper. Especially outside the context of the therapy session, I think it can be a good way to work with parts because you're kind of trying to check in to see like, what are the thoughts running through my brain today? What are the urges and modes that I kind of feel are most present? And what do I need? Like, what do these parts of me need, like going forward today? So I think there's like a lot of cool ways expressive arts can integrate with parts work, both like for therapy and just kind of as like a reflective tool and like mode of expression. I also think in experiences we have, sometimes we notice parts of us that we wouldn't notice like in any other context. Like if you're in a group with other people, you're going to notice parts of you that you're not going to notice when you're just by yourself at home. So yeah, it's a different ways to use it.
I think I like how it's like, you know, it could be anything, right? It doesn't have to be just, you know, piece of paper and I'm using some kind of thing on the paper, right? Like you said, social media or dance or whatever. It's just being able to move and do in a way that feels right to you. And we're not, back to what you said at the beginning, we're not pathologizing what they're doing. We're kind of just recognizing like, how does that feel, or what does that say to you? What does that color mean to you specifically versus, you know, I don't know, Freud or whoever would be like, well, you use black and black means, you know, this way and this, right? We're not you wouldn't be pathologizing in that way. It would just be kind of observing and wanting them to describe why they chose what they chose and what that meant to them. Is that on the right track?
Yeah, it would be not about me giving an interpretation or like saying it's right or wrong, you know, or like giving my opinion on it in any way, but more helping them explore their experience of it. So like a little bit of a distinction between expressive arts and like someone who's like an art therapist, which I think art therapy is really cool too. It's I'm not trained in art therapy specifically. I think there's like a lot of cool potential with that as like an approach with parts work. But to me, expressive arts can kind of just be like, it's good for resourcing and it's a good way to, especially if there's like a stuckness in any way, shape, or form. Let's say even like we're really stuck in like our thinking, like ruminating parts that are like maybe constrict us, like just doing some simple movements or being like, how do I, you know, if I engage in this like, you know, stream of consciousness, like art thing for like 5 minutes, what do I notice shift inside me? So,
okay. Okay. Yeah. No, I appreciate some of that, like subtle differences between art therapy and like the expressive arts piece, because I'm sure they are different, different training and all kinds of things with that. So thank you for kind of separating that. So when it comes to like things that people can do, as far as like being connected with themselves. And so like, you know, in therapy, we're like, self-care, it's important, whether it's us as clinicians, like we need to take part in that, or our clients, you know, I often say like when it comes to journaling, for example, right? I don't know if you have this, but I know I get it. Like that doesn't work for me. You know, I'm like, well, how often have you tried it? And when have you tried it? You know, like in bed at night as I'm going to sleep, you know, or trying to go to sleep, maybe that's not what's going to work for you. And so if that's the only time you've tried it, then it doesn't work. And so I guess how would you utilize or recommend talking to people about like those coping strategies when it comes to being more attuned to themselves and recognizing like what is or is not going to be helpful and kind of teasing that out?
And I think when as a younger therapist, like, I don't know if you relate to this, but I sometimes feel this sense of like, I'm teaching you these coping skills and you're not using them, and they're very helpful, and like, there feel like that like frustration. But I think these days I like to so someone like reframed it for me as like, rather than thinking of it as like self-care time, as like self-regulation time that you're building into your, and self-regulation meaning just working with your nervous system. Like if I'm really hyper-aroused, activated, or I'm like numbed out, things that kind of help me to get back online or feel a little more present in my life. I think a really cool starting point is there's a resource that explores the different types of rest, so I don't know if I can name all of them off the top of my head, but like we think of like physical rest, like I need to like sleep because I'm exhausted. But there's also sensory rest or mental rest or social rest. And so I think that can be a good resource to try to like get curious about what if I'm feeling like I'm not well overall, like I'm not taking care of myself, what different types of rest am I needing? And what parts of me kind of say like that's not possible or not doable? Or like what, just like natural barriers maybe like are there to engaging in some of those things. Could be like a good way to like have a conversation about what is it that like you're actually needing.
Okay. No, I like that, the kind of breaking that up into the different types of rest, because I think we look at that and we go like, we look at our life like as a whole, and then it's like, well, what do I have time for? What am I able to do versus can we break it down even into different categories? I like that.
Yeah. And also just getting, a more felt sense of supposed to be like, I need to go to the gym and I need to like work out for an hour. Like maybe for some people it's like, that actually is what I need and that does feel good. Or maybe what you're needing is just like some like mental rest to go for a walk, or like or to like engage with someone socially. Like maybe what you need more is like connection. And so that's where I think it can just help you to figure out on any given day, like what do I need to feel a little more regulated, or and are there like, I call them perfectionist fantasies that you're getting into of like, I'm gonna have the perfect morning routine and I'm gonna do this and that, and
and I'm sure we could like go down all the rabbit holes and talk about all the different things, but are there any like other important facets to like whether it's IFS or that kind of like self-care, self-regulation piece, or the expressive arts that you think it's important for people to know before they either engage in it or if they're just curious that we haven't already addressed today?
I think that just when it comes to any change that you're seeking to make in the way you like care for yourself, or if you're having those internal thoughts of like, I don't know why I keep getting in my own way, and like those, just to know that like changing these things is very hard. It's not easy to like build new experiences, neural pathways, and like our brain is so hardwired to keep us safe and kind of like in homeostasis. And so I guess I just feel compelled to say that because I feel like I've worked with a lot of people, and I for sure am like this still, like in kind of work in progress of taking in all this like self-help knowledge and kind of like feeling like I know what to do to like change myself and make myself better. But it feels so hard to put those things into action. Like I know that book Atomic Habits is like really popular, and I think there's like a lot of good information in it, and it can be very helpful. At the same time, those like the urge to, keep ourselves safe, like can really prevent us from trying new things and kind of like taking care of ourselves in certain ways. So just to be like, hold yourself with some compassion and know like, it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. I think that idea of safety is something that is not something I think most people are knowledgeable about. Like when I could be wrong, but I think when most people hear safety, when I ask people or bring it up in session, I have to kind of pull back and provide some more information, right? Because I think when we think safety, like it's physical safety, like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to be hurt. Well, no, I'm not worried about getting hurt, like,
Yeah.
okay, but are you worried about, being embarrassed or not knowing, feeling stupid or, fill in the blank, right? Like those are what we're talking about when we're talking about safety. It's not just like my physical body, but it's, all these other aspects of life. Like I'm not going to feel wanted or needed and in that feeling, I don't feel safe. And therefore, I don't do things.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important thing for people to understand when it comes to like that idea of safety. It's not just physical safety, like that can definitely be part of it. But here we're often talking about emotional safety. And how we protect you from that and how we can help you push those boundaries, or break through even. So those barriers that maybe keep you feeling like you're unsafe when maybe you're not, right? Like it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And therefore my brain tells me that's unsafe.
Right. Yeah. Or there's, deep-seated fears around disconnection from other people, which we're hardwired to like be in connection with others. And so even if part of you knows like, oh, this isn't quote unquote rational, like that urge and that like safety pull to like retract is just very strong. So
no, I appreciate you talking about all this. As we're talking, like my gears are spinning and like different clients are like popping in my head. I'm like, oh, that's an idea. Oh, that's an idea. So I just like love having these conversations with people because it always inspires like new thoughts and new ways of handling things and doing things. So
totally.
Thank you so much for sharing all this with me. And again, I know we could probably talk for a while and, go down all kinds of routes, but I think this can definitely provide people with more information on what IFS is and how we can integrate that into our practice or, into their own, someone's therapy if they're interested in it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me and talking about this stuff. So
yeah, you're very welcome.